Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How are you all doing out there? I'm currently performing a tech challenge as part of my New Year's resolutions and trying to lose weight using virtual reality and a Quest 2 headset, which I picked up on offer recently. But let me tell you, I've got a newfound respect for drummers and boxers. A few rock tracks and rounds with some virtual boxers, and I can hardly lift my arms right now. But more on that story later. Man, do I have a great guest for you today. His name is Zeb Evans, and he's turned a 50-person Series A startup called ClickUp into a $4 billion company with more than 700 employees and counting, and done all that in less than 18 months. And not only did he have a great tech story, but he has also had 4 near-death experiences, which instilled a sense of urgency to make an impact on the lives on people around him, forcing him to reprioritise his personal energy and career aspirations. This one is the perfect mix of an inspiring human, business and tech story that really does have everything. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the Bahamas, where Zeb Evans is waiting to speak with us. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Zeb. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Neil. So I'm Zeb Evans. I am the founder and CEO at ClickUp. We do productivity software for keeping all of your work in one place and ensuring that teams are aligned and being able to communicate no matter where they are or when they are working. And so ClickUp, actually, its whole platform replaces most of your workplace productivity software. So things like project management, docs, goal tracking, communication, all of that is in one single platform within ClickUp.
Quite excited to get you on the podcast today because it's the wonderful role of serendipity in this life, because I write a tech column for a company called Cyber News, and all the pictures to the editor and all the articles and everything, and when I deliver the articles, it's all managed through ClickUp. So I'm quite familiar with what you're doing here. Yeah. And then literally a few weeks ago, I was contacted by a member of your team, and I'm like, yes, I love you guys. I use your stuff all the time. But before we go there, can you share your origin story? Where did your passion for tech come from, and what put you on this path that you're on today with ClickUp?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been an entrepreneur since I was born. Since I was 4 or 5 years old, I remember I was the kid that was selling things. I was selling candy at school. I was selling Beanie Babies, Pokemon cards, anything that I could get my hands on. I was creating an experience and or selling that experience. So that has stayed with me my whole life. I don't really know where it came from. Nobody in my family was an entrepreneur. They're actually in the medical field, so I definitely took the alternate route. But the point is, almost every year of my life, I've got some type of entrepreneurial story. But flash forward, also, I fell in love with technology. And by the way, I'm about 30 years old. So this was a while ago. When I was 10, roughly 20 years ago, was when I fell in love with technology. And back then, as a 10-year-old, you didn't have cell phones or computers like you do today. You didn't really have access to technology back then. But I had one of my first of 4 near-death experiences, and that landed me in the hospital for a couple of months. And in the hospital, they had a laptop, and that was where I fell in love with technology and started creating websites and selling things on the web. So that's what put me on the path towards ClickUp today. Had that not happened, I mean, who knows? I likely would not be. I would probably never have married that love for technology and entrepreneurship. I probably would have a brick and mortar store somewhere.
Man, before we go any further, we've got to go there, haven't we? 4, not 1, 2, 3, 4 near-death experiences. Can you tell me more about that and how it instilled that sense of urgency to make this impact on people's lives around you?
Yeah, it's funny because I think after my first one, it certainly at a young age taught me how fragile life is and how special and meaningful time is. But then throughout the next several years, I continued thinking that like I would die young. I always had that inside of me. In fact, I had this arbitrary number of 30. And I'm actually 32 now. So I had this number of 30 where I wouldn't live past 30. And I don't really know why. But when I was in college, I had my second near-death experience. And I was robbed at gunpoint in a home invasion, and a 17-year-old kid held a gun to my head for about 10 minutes, which felt like eternity. And I was able to, everybody talks about these like out of body experiences. And I didn't really have an out of body experience. It was more like an in back of my mind experience where I just looked at my life of what I've done now and what I want to do in the future. And I realized college was not for me. And so that was where I dropped out of college, and I started, I had always known how to like do basic HTML and WYSIWYG editors on the web, but I never really knew how to program. So I dropped out of college and I learned how to program. And that was where I started my first like real business, and was right after that. And so again, that was another near-death experience that kind of just put me on this path towards technology, towards creating things. And ironically, that business was where I started my dance with productivity software. We started with one piece of software, started Basecamp, and then we ended up with 15 different productivity tools. And so it was this, clusterfuck of productivity applications. And I was so frustrated with wasting time and not knowing where things were, that I really wanted to create something like ClickUp. And so that was what led me to the idea of ClickUp.
And for people listening and hearing about ClickUp for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about what makes ClickUp different from other solutions that people listening might be using, and the kind of problems that you set out to solve with this tech?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem we always set out to solve is that this problem of app sprawl, meaning you had to use so many different productivity tools in order to work. So usually companies, even small companies, you'll have at least one project management tool. It's like an Asana or a Basecamp. You'll also have an engineering tool like a Jira. You'll also have usually time tracking and docs or knowledge bases, goal tracking, team communication. You'll have Google Docs, Google Sheets, Slack, Skype. You have all of these different productivity tools, and they did not talk well to each other. And you certainly didn't know what people were working on. You didn't know what you should work on next, and you didn't know what got done with your team or even with yourself. And so ClickUp is a platform that provides all of those tools in one place. And instead of thinking about it from an opinionated perspective, meaning you should work this way and this is the software we're going to provide, we've always thought about it with no opinion. The only opinion that we have is that you're using our software to get more done, to be more productive, to save time. And so with that, any company of any size can use ClickUp in order to get more done, in order to do just that.
Fantastic. And of course, we are at that time of the year where people will be making New Year's resolutions and trying to improve themselves. And I'm a big believer in marginal gains. And the reason I mention that is when I was doing a bit of research on you, I noticed you also got this personal commitment to growing 1% every day, and how that has compounded into one of the fastest growing startups in SaaS. But can you share that or expand on that?
Yeah. The grow 1% every day has been at the core of my personal development for several years, but also at our business development and our culture. It's one of our core values is grow 1% every day. There's this book, The Slight Edge, that talks about growing 1% every day. And that's where I picked the pieces up for that, where if you can just do a little bit over time, it compounds. And that's how you move really big things. That's how you move mountains. But the other thing, the little things that I do to grow 1% every day, certainly I always make time for reading. It doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes or an hour. I always just make time to read at least a few pages in a book, move that needle a little bit. I also always make time for journaling. I journal at the end of every day and the beginning of every day. And like I mentioned before this talk, at the end of every year, I go back and I reread all of my journals from the past. And I now have 8 years of journals. And so I go back and I reread every single one. And you really learn crazy insights about the time that you had years ago, the things that you learned years ago, the mistakes that you made years ago. And you're also able to just zoom out and be appreciative of how far you've come, because you don't always realize that in the day-to-day moments. I think anybody that is an achiever, anybody that really wants more is always going to move. They're going to move the goalpost ahead. You're going to hit one goal and you're going to continue moving it ahead. But it's important to take time and really celebrate just hitting all of the goalposts that you've ever hit.
And what do you journal about there? Is it goal setting or things you're grateful for, or a mixture of it?
I always get asked the question of like, how do you start journaling? Yeah. And my answer is, because when I look back at my first journals, they were shit compared to what I write today. It was really just, hey, I ate at McDonald's today. I don't feel great. I probably shouldn't eat at McDonald's this often. Like that type of thing. It was very basic. It was very just, this is what I'm doing today. This is what I'm doing tomorrow. But if you just start doing that, then over time, you create something magical that's really custom to you. And so today, jump forward, I'm talking about the problems that we're experiencing at our company. I'm talking about personal development things that I'm working on, relationships, anything that I'm feeling, if I'm feeling bad, if I'm feeling great, what got me feeling that way, insights that I've learned. It becomes much more insightful over time, especially when you can go back and read that stuff. But I always say, just start. It doesn't matter what you start with, just start. The only way to fail at journaling is not doing it. Right? You have to just do it every single day.
Absolutely. I was reading, I can't remember where I read it or where I heard it, but there was a guy that he did a journal, and he wrote one thing every day that he was grateful for about his wife, and little things that she was doing. It might even just be an innocent smile or a joke or a nod. And every day he committed to this for the year, and then he gave it his wife at the end of the year as a Christmas gift. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. So if anybody can commit to something like that, it can win you a few brownie points with your significant other too.
I love that. I think I went to a Tony Robbins event several years ago, and he was like, think about 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And for a period of my journal, I think a year or two, I wrote down 3 things that I was grateful for every day. And then it trains your brain to just be grateful for things, because you're always searching for what can you be grateful for. It's the simplest things, but it does train your brain in a different way.
And it certainly seems to be working. You've turned a 50-person Series A startup into a $4 billion company with more than 700 employees and counting in the last 18 months. So for any startup founders listening, feeling inspired by your story, can you tell me a little bit more about how you did that and maybe some of the lessons that you learned along the way too?
Absolutely. I think a couple of the really important things that I did, we bootstrapped a really long time, right? We didn't raise funds for a significant, it wasn't that long in years, but it was that long in like the maturity of the business cycle. So when we first raised, which is a year and a half ago, we had already had a very profitable company without raising funds. We already had product market fit without raising funds. And we already had the core of our team there without raising funds. And so doing that means that we already have a business. You have a real business there. You have a real product there. You've got real customers. And raising funds doesn't mean like, here's our lifeline to survive and let's just be unsustainable in our growth. What it meant was, let's grow faster and let's be able to do all the things that we wanted to do in a shortened timeline. And that's why what I think raising funds is really great for. It's after you have that business there, after you have a product there, then it's about just accelerating your vision. And that's what fundraising should be. It shouldn't be your lifeline for keeping your product alive or being able to hire people. I think that if without funds, and particularly maybe raise seed, like a really small seed round to be able to feed yourself and feed a couple of employees. But what it does is it makes you really think critically. If you don't have any funds, you don't have any safety net, you have nothing, you have the decisions you make are going to be much better and much more thought out. The people you hire are going to be much more invested and not just jump around than if you had raised funds. So I really advocate for raising as little funds as possible, or to none if you can, until you have product market fit, until you have that company there. I think you also need to be very mindful of any holes that you have as a founder. If you are not a technical person, I considered myself very technical. I knew how to program. I built my own previous application. I actually built some of ClickUp today, but I knew I wouldn't scale. I knew I wasn't that technical master. And so I had to find somebody like that. And you're always going to be taking a risk on somebody. They're taking a risk on you. So there's a little bit of serendipity. There's a little bit of luck for sure. But you got to make sure to find the right people to complement yourself. And finally, you got to move fast. Like, all that matters at the beginning of companies stage is moving faster than the other people that are trying to do the exact same thing that you're doing, or moving faster than the competitors that have already done what you're doing, right? In a very competitive industry, there's always going to be products and platforms and employees out there that are trying to prevent you from coming into the category. And so the only way to outmaneuver them is to move faster. And that's what you have going for you as a startup, is you can move faster than larger companies. You can move much faster. And I think all of that put together, those are the things that really matter. But I also would say something I would tell myself when I was starting out, was that nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody is just figuring it out as they go. And I still am figuring it out today. And even when I talk to, CEOs of the largest public companies in the world, they're in the same boat. They're still just figuring it out as they go as well. Now, you can hire people that have figured it out before and have been on that path before, and that certainly can help you leapfrog things. But the reality is no two paths are the same. And so you're always going to be carving your own path, and you just have to trust your gut.
Wow, fantastic advice. Absolutely love that. And if we have any business leaders listening, maybe they've got their own struggles with hybrid working, looking for new tools and how they can better communicate and manage workloads, etc. Do you have a use case that would just help them understand how ClickUp might be able to help and how they could get the most out of it?
Yeah, I think that the beauty about ClickUp is that it can be used for anything. That's also a little bit harder to get started because it can be used for anything. But what we have are these things called spaces, and each space can be thought of as like a use case or a department or even a product or an app. So you can have a space for engineering, you can have a space for product, for marketing, and we have a lot of really cool space templates inside of ClickUp. And so I would encourage anybody to just go and ClickUp and go to our template store, which is free. All the templates are free. And we have a free forever platform also, where you can just start with any template that you want. So if you're working on marketing right now, you can go in there and start a marketing template. If you're working on engineering, you can start an engineering template. If you're working on a startup, we have a startup template as well. Those are really great ways to get started and start being productive.
And although this is a tech show, I'm always fascinated by the human element behind people's success. And one of the things that stood out for me when I was researching you was about how you use mindfulness, meditation, and reflection to stay grounded in one of the most competitive and stressful tech industries in the world. Is that something you can expand on too? Because again, it's something that we don't hear about that much, and I think it's so important to share, especially right now where mindfulness and burnout, it's such a hot topic, isn't it?
It matters more than anything. It really does. And I think that people always talk about work-life balance. And for me, my perspective has always been like work way more than the life balance. That's just how my DNA works. And I think lots of founders are the same way. But the caveat is that you have to have your personal life balance in order to be able to have sustainable the work part, to make that work part sustainable. Otherwise, you will get burnt out. But there's things, it's not like you have to go take a vacation every weekend, right? There's little things that you can do every day in order to create that sustainable work environment and that work mindset. And for me, it certainly starts with the mornings. Like it's all about, I wake up and I take a bath every single morning and I journal just, do not for long, just for 10 or 15 minutes. I then get out of the bath and I do meditation. Again, not for long, just for 10 or 15 minutes. And then I exercise every single day. I try to always do this before I connect to ClickUp or connect to Slack or connect to email, because as soon as you do that, your brain starts turning and ticking, and you'll get distracted and you get pulled into those things. 95% of the time, I'm successful in that. Sometimes I'm not. And I think it's all just about doing those routines, like your habits every single day. It's those small habits that like keep you connected to yourself and keep you sane in a world where you get pulled in every single different direction.
Man, that sounds so much better than my early morning routine, which pretty much consists of before I get in the shower and take my dog for a walk, is I have a cheeky look at my email to see which ones are the spam ones I can just get rid of before starting my day. And you made such a good point there. You need to just delay that for a moment and take a time for yourself, don't you?
Yep, exactly.
We began the podcast so I missed a question. But what's next for you and ClickUp? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, we're super excited about this upcoming year. We've always been that product company that releases a new version of features every week. And so we're continuing to do that this year. But there's some huge features in the pipeline. I think more around team communication and team collaboration, where we can truly put all of those things in one single place. And that's something. I'm still the product founder, right? If I could spend all my day on product, I would, but I've got to do the CEO job during the day, and I do product outside of that. And so for us, product is more important than anything. We've got some super exciting things coming up and product, but also we grew from 100 to 800 employees in a year, and we're going to continue growing at a significant pace this year with our employee counts. We're opening new offices in Dublin and Sydney, so we are going global, and I hope to go visit those places sometime soon. At a certain point, it's about the people that you hire, right? And I think when you're an early stage company, It's about the product. It's about what you're creating, which in many ways is the people that you have with you. But more so, it's to be successful, you just have to have that product. Like, is the product actually working? Is it adding value to customers' lives, to users' lives? And then after that, once you get to scale, it's all about the people. Are you hiring the right people that enable you to scale? Because you already have the product there. You got the foundation there. Now you have to focus on the people. And so that's what's next for us.
We began the podcast talking about your origin story. And as we come full circle, I've got a bit of an off-the-wall question for you here. I want to ask if a song, piece of music, movie, or book has inspired you or helped you in your career. Is there something that you could choose and share with us? And I'll add it to one of our lists.
Yeah, you mentioned The Slight Edge early on. That's a really quick read. It's just a couple hours. It's very helpful for just thinking about really big, meaty things that you want to do in life and breaking them down into smaller chunks and getting them done that way. The other book, if I had to mention one, it's The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. It's not really a business book. It's more about just being present, being mindful. I love that book. It's actually helped me out a ton in business. It's helped me out a ton in being able to get into flow when I'm working on product. So certainly one of my favorites. And then as far as movies go, I love Jobs. It's the Steve with Ashton Kutcher. I think it's of all time. Another one is Slingshot. It's this documentary that has Dean Kamen, who was the inventor of Segway, in it. And it just shows how you can create resources in life, right, through business. And then you can use those resources for good things after business. You can use those resources for changing the world. And so those have always been very inspiring to me.
Awesome. I love that. I'll add that to the Spotify playlist, and we've got the Amazon list. I'll make sure people can find those nice and easily. But before I let you go, anyone wanting to find out more information about ClickUp, what's the best way of finding you online?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. So Zeb Evans on LinkedIn, and I engage with everybody on there. And I also post a video every week called Zeb Talks, where I just go into lessons that I've learned that week. So that's probably the best place. And for anybody interested in ClickUp, obviously check out our website, clickup.com. We're also on LinkedIn as well as Twitter.
Cannot thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me today. I know you're talking to me from the Bahamas at the moment, so you show great discipline there as well. I wish you the best of luck for the future. I'd love to meet you in person at a future tech conference when things start opening up again. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to share your story with me today.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Neil.
What a great guy. And he's really got me thinking seriously about journaling now. I've always thought I didn't have the time, but just taking that time out for yourself to just write a few lines each day and being able to look back in a few years, certainly something I'm going to be looking at. But a big thank you to Zeb for sharing his very personal story, where the productivity market is heading and why he's so obsessed with saving people time. And again, also great to hear that personal commitment about growing 1% every day and how this is actually compounded into one of the fastest growing startups in SaaS with ClickUp. But as always, keep your messages coming in. techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything you heard today. But other than that, I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.